Pinnacle Station hung in the darkness of space like a massive crystal, its transparent sections glowing with the light of 1,000 different worlds. Inside its corridors walked beings from every corner of the galaxy, some with scales, others with feathers, a few that floated rather than walked. It was supposed to be the greatest academy in known space, a place where the children of diplomats and politicians learned to work together. But like any school anywhere in the universe, it had its outcasts. Zira kept her eyes down as she walked through the main corridor. Her silver skin caught the light in ways that made other students stare, and not in a good way. The Qualith weren't like the other species here. They didn't have massive warships patrolling their borders. They hadn't discovered faster-than-light travel on their own. When the galactic community had found them, the Qualith were still using basic rockets to explore their own star system. To most of the other species at Pinnacle Station, that made them primitive, backward, unworthy of respect. The cafeteria was the worst part of Zira's day. She'd learned to arrive either very early or very late, trying to avoid the lunch rush when the popular students held court at their tables. Today, she'd mistimed it. The large circular room was packed with students, and every table seemed full of groups that had no interest in making room for a Qualith. She spotted an empty seat at the far end near the viewing windows and made her way toward it, carefully balancing her tray. The food wasn't anything like what she'd grown up eating. The station synthesizers did their best to accommodate hundreds of different digestive systems, but everything tasted vaguely metallic to her. Still, she was grateful to have found a spot where she might eat in peace. "Watch it!" Someone snarled as Zira passed a table full of Draxian students. She hadn't touched anyone, hadn't come close, but the speaker, a tall creature with bronze scales and cold yellow eyes, stuck out a leg anyway. Zira saw it happening but couldn't stop her momentum. Her foot caught, and she stumbled forward. The tray flew from her hands, sending a meal splattering across the polished floor. Laughter erupted from the Draxian table, then spread to nearby groups. Zira felt her skin flush darker, a Qualith response to shame that everyone could see. "Oh no, the primitive made a mess," the bronze-scale student said, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Better clean that up before someone thinks you're even more useless than we already know you are." Zira dropped to her knees, trying to scoop the food back onto her tray with shaking hands. Other students walked past, some laughing, most just ignoring her. A few looked uncomfortable but kept moving. Nobody helped. Nobody ever helped. "You know what?" Another Draxian said, this one with deep purple scales. "I heard the Qualith eat off the ground anyway. Probably feels just like home for her." More laughter. Zira wanted to disappear, to fade into nothing right there on the cafeteria floor. She'd been at Pinnacle Station for 3 months, and every day was like this. The insults, the casual cruelty, the way teachers and administrators looked right through her when she tried to report it. The Draxian Empire controlled a dozen star systems. Her people controlled one planet and barely that. Who was going to risk an interstellar incident over one unhappy student? She finally got most of the mess onto her tray and stood up, refusing to let them see her cry. The Qualith didn't cry the way humans or many other species did, but her eyes were dim, and that was close enough. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. As she walked toward the disposal unit, tray clutched tightly, she heard the bronze-scale Draxian call out one more time. "See you tomorrow, primitive. Try not to trip over your own feet." His friends howled with laughter. Zira dumped her tray and left the cafeteria without eating. She'd gone hungry before. It was better than this. Back in her quarters at night, Zira pulled up a communication console and stared at the icon that would connect her to her family back home. They'd been so proud when she'd been selected for Pinnacle Station, so hopeful that she'd make connections, build bridges between the Qualith and the greater galactic community. How could she tell them that she was spending most of her time just trying to survive each day? That the great honor of attending the academy felt more like a punishment? She didn't make the call. Instead, she pulled out her personal tablet and began researching transport schedules back to Qualith space. Maybe it was time to admit defeat. Maybe some people just weren't meant for places like this. Tyler Brooks had been at Pinnacle Station for exactly 2 weeks, and he was still getting used to the idea that he was having lunch with a floating blob of sentient gas and a lizard person who could see in 17 different color spectrums. Earth's acceptance into the galactic community was recent enough that most humans still felt like the new kids at school, which, technically, Tyler was. He'd chosen a seat near the windows where he could watch the stars while he ate. The food wasn't great. Apparently the synthesizers couldn't quite nail human taste preferences yet. But the view made up for it. He was halfway through something that was supposed to be a sandwich when he noticed a commotion across the cafeteria. A group of students at one of the central tables were laughing, the kind of laughter that made Tyler's stomach tighten. He'd heard that sound before in high school back in Denver. It was never about something actually funny. He followed their gaze and saw a girl with silver skin on her hands and knees, trying to clean up spilled food while students walked past her like she wasn't even there. Tyler watched as one of the bronze-scaled aliens said something that made his whole table roar with laughter. The silver-skinned girl's shoulders hunched, and even from across the room, Tyler could see she was trying not to react. He recognized that posture, too. He'd worn it himself once, back in 9th grade, before he'd figured out that bullies only had as much power as you gave them. The girl stood up and walked away without eating anything. The bronze-scaled alien called out something else, and his friends laughed even harder. Tyler looked around the cafeteria. Easily 200 students, dozens of species, and not one person seemed bothered by what had just happened. Some looked uncomfortable, sure, but uncomfortable enough to look away wasn't the same as uncomfortable enough to do something. Tyler set down his drink carefully and stood up. He wasn't entirely sure what he was doing, but his feet were already moving toward the group of bullies. His roommate, a kid from somewhere in the Andromeda sector, had warned him that the Draxians were bad news. Their empire was massive, and they knew it. "Hey," Tyler said, stopping next to their table. All 6 Draxians turned to look at him. Up close, they were even more intimidating, each one at least 7 feet tall with scales that looked sharp enough to cut. "Can we help you, human?" the bronze-scaled one asked, his voice making it clear that helping was the last thing on his mind. Tyler picked up his tray from where he'd been sitting and walked back over to them. Then, very deliberately, he turned his tray upside down and dumped his entire meal on the floor right in front of their table. 6 pairs of yellow eyes stared at him in confusion. "What are you doing?" the purple-scaled one demanded. "Oh, sorry," Tyler said, lowering himself down to sit cross-legged on the floor next to his spilled food. He picked up what had been his sandwich and took a bite, maintaining eye contact with the bronze-scaled alien the whole time. "I'm just following the new station custom I observed. Isn't this how we eat here now?" The cafeteria had gone quiet. Tyler could feel hundreds of eyes on him, but he kept his focus on the Draxians. The bronze-scaled one's face was doing something complicated. Confusion mixed with anger mixed with uncertainty. "That's not—" She dropped her food, he said, his voice less confident than before. "Hey," Tyler said, taking another bite from the floor. "Looked to me like someone tripped her. My mistake, though. I must have misunderstood the custom. So we only make certain species eat off the floor? Is there like a list I should know about? Or do you just pick based on who you think can't fight back?" A few students nearby made sound that might have been alien versions of gasps. The purple-scaled Draxian stood up, his full height making Tyler feel very small from his position on the floor. "You want to be careful, human. Earth is very new to the galactic community. Very small. Very unimportant." Tyler stayed sitting, even though every instinct told him to stand up. "You're probably right. We're definitely not a big empire like yours. But back on Earth, we have the saying, 'Hold my beer.' It's what we say right before we do something that might be really stupid but feels important anyway." He took another bite of food from the floor, chewing slowly. "So here I am, eating lunch off the floor like I watched that girl do. And you know what? I think I'm going to keep doing it. Every day. Right here. Unless, of course, nobody has to eat off the floor anymore. Your choice, really." The bronze-scaled Draxian opened his mouth, then closed it. He wasn't used to people mocking him. Tyler could see that much. Especially not someone from a species that barely registered on the galactic power scale. But Tyler had done everything just shy of breaking any actual rules, and more importantly, other students were starting to whisper and point. "You're insane," the Draxian finally said. "Maybe," Tyler agreed cheerfully, "but I'm insane with a clean disciplinary record. How about you?" The Draxians exchanged looks, clearly uncertain how to handle someone who wasn't intimidated by their threats. Finally, they turned back to their own meals, trying to pretend Tyler didn't exist. But the damage was done. Students throughout the cafeteria were talking, and Tyler caught more than a few looks of surprise and respect from species he'd never even spoken to. He finished his floor meal, dumped his tray, and headed for the door. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. The next morning, Tyler's door chime woke him at 5 in the morning. When he opened it, nobody was there, but his environmental controls had been tampered with. His quarters were freezing, cold enough that frost had formed on the inside of his window. He wrapped himself in a blanket and manually reset the system, making a note on his personal tablet with a timestamp and what had happened. By the time he made it to breakfast, word had spread. The human who'd mocked the Draxians was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, and nobody seemed sure which. Tyler grabbed his tray and looked around the cafeteria. He spotted Zira sitting alone near the back, her silver skin seeming to glow in the morning light. He walked over without hesitation. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. Zira looked up, her large dark eyes widening in surprise. "You're the human from yesterday. The one who ate off the floor?" "Yeah, that was me. Tyler Brooks, by the way." "Zira." She hesitated, then added, "You shouldn't sit with me. It'll just make them target you more." Tyler sat down anyway. "Little late for that. Someone already messed with my environmental controls this morning. I woke up in what felt like a freezer." "I'm sorry," Zira said quietly. "This is my fault." "No, it's really not." Tyler opened his meal packet, which was supposed to be oatmeal but looked nothing like it. "It's the fault of the jerks who think they can treat people however they want just because their empire has more warships. You didn't do anything wrong." They ate in silence for a few minutes before Tyler asked about the Kvalid homeworld. Zira seemed surprised by his interest, but slowly she started talking. She told him about the floating gardens her people grew, about their tradition of star singing where they'd harmonize with the natural frequencies of their planet's magnetic field. Tyler shared stories about Earth, about mountains and oceans, and the weird human obsession with putting cheese on everything. By the end of breakfast, they were laughing. Tyler noticed other students watching them, some with curiosity, a few with what might have been approval, and the Draxians with barely concealed anger. Over the next week, the pranks escalated. Tyler's homework assignments mysteriously vanished from the station's network. His locker was reprogrammed to reject his access code. Someone filed an anonymous complaint claiming he'd been aggressive toward other students, which earned him a warning from a board administrator who clearly didn't believe the complaint but had to follow protocol. Tyler documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, witness statements from the few students brave enough to talk to him. He kept it all organized in an encrypted file that he backed up every night. More importantly, other students started joining him in Zira at meals. First came a Belvari student named Kess, whose species was looked down on because they were pacifists with no military. Then twin sisters from Meridian V, whose planet had recently lost a trade dispute with the Draxian Empire. A Quellan kid whose translator had a glitch that made his speech slow and difficult to understand. One by one, the outcasts and the overlooked found their way to what other students started calling the humans' table. Tyler noticed that each of them had stories similar to Zira's. The casual cruelty, the administrative indifference, the way power dynamics played out in every interaction at Pinnacle Station. It wasn't just about strong versus weak. It was about which species had leverage, whose governments paid the biggest contributions to the station's operating budget, whose politicians could make life difficult for administrators. The Draxians noticed a growing group too. One afternoon in the training center, Tyler was running obstacle courses when something went wrong with the gravity plating beneath him. He dropped 3 feet instantly and landed hard on his shoulder. Nothing broken, but the bruising would last for days. Zira, who'd been training nearby, had barely avoided being hit by a piece of equipment that had come loose at the same time. The training supervisor, a crystalline being who communicated through light pulses, insisted it was a systems malfunction. But Tyler had seen one of the Draxians near the control panel just before it happened, and the look on that bronze-scale face told him everything he needed to know. That night, Tyler sat in his quarters reviewing his documentation. He had dozens of incidents recorded now, a clear pattern of harassment targeting specific students from less powerful species. The problem was that nobody seemed to care. He'd tried reporting things through proper channels, but each complaint disappeared into administrative paperwork and nothing changed. Zira messaged him late that evening. Maybe we should just keep our heads down. Let things settle. Tyler stared at the message for a long time before responding. The smart thing would be to back off, to stop making waves. He had 2 more years at Pinnacle Station, and making powerful enemies on his second week wasn't exactly a great long-term strategy. But then he thought about Zero on her knees in the cafeteria, about Kes who flinched every time a Draxian walked past, about all the students who'd spent months or years accepting this treatment because they'd been taught that their species didn't matter enough to fight back. He opened the station student handbook and started reading through the diplomatic protocol section. There had to be something in there, some rule or procedure that could force people to pay attention. And after an hour of searching, he found it. Tyler smiled and began drafting a formal request. The Draxians wanted escalation. They were about to get it. The training accident had been the final straw, but Tyler knew he needed to be smart about this. Going to the administration again would accomplish nothing. He'd tried that route 3 times already, and each time his complaint had been noted, filed, and promptly ignored. The station's funding came from powerful governments, and nobody wanted to risk a diplomatic incident over what they kept calling student conflicts. But buried in Section 7 of the Student Handbook was something called the Open Forum Protocol. It was an old rule, probably written when Pinnacle Station first opened, meant to encourage democratic participation. Any student could request a formal assembly to address the entire station on matters of shared concern. The catch was that you only got 15 minutes, and you had to present your case to everyone, students, faculty, and administration all at once. Tyler submitted his formal request on a Thursday morning. By galactic law, the administration had to approve it within 48 hours unless they could prove the topic would cause immediate harm. Tyler had been very careful with his wording. A presentation on alliance-building practices and institutional responses to interpersonal conflict. Vague enough to get approved, specific enough for what he needed. The approval came through Friday evening. The assembly was scheduled for Monday at noon in the main auditorium. Zira found him in the library that weekend, surrounded by data tablets and old Earth history files. "Tyler, what are you doing? Everyone's talking about this assembly." "Research," he said, not looking up from a tablet showing information about the civil rights movement back on Earth. "If I'm going to get one shot at this, it needs to be perfect." "You're going to accuse him directly, aren't you?" "The Draxians will." "I'm not going to accuse anyone," Tyler interrupted. "That's the whole point. The moment I make it about specific people, they can dismiss it as a personal grudge. I need to make it about the system." Kes floated over, his gaseous form flickering with concern. "The administration will shut you down. They protected those students for months. They protected them in private meetings and closed or complaint sessions." Tyler agreed. "But this is public. Every student, every teacher, every administrator in one room. And it's all being recorded for the permanent station archive. That changes things." Monday morning came faster than Tyler expected. He'd barely slept, running through his presentation over and over in his head. When he walked into the cafeteria for breakfast, the usual morning noise died down. Everyone knew about the assembly. The Draxians sat at their usual table, the bronze-scaled leaders staring at Tyler with undisguised hatred. Tyler forced himself to eat, even though his stomach was doing flips. Zira sat next to him, along with Kes and the others who had become his friends over the past 2 weeks. None of them said much. What was there to say? The auditorium was packed by the time Tyler arrived. Every seat was filled, and students lined the walls. He spotted his roommate giving him a thumbs up, an odd gesture Tyler had taught him. The faculty sat in a special section to the left, and the administrative staff occupied the front row. Director Vosh, a towering insectoid being who ran Pinnacle Station, sat in the center, her compound eyes reflecting the stage lights. Tyler walked to the podium, placed his data tablet on it, and looked out at the crowd. His hands were shaking. He gripped the sides of the podium to steady them. "Thank you all for coming," he started, and his voice only cracked a little. "I want to talk today about something my people back on Earth struggle with for a long time, how societies respond when some members have power and others don't." He pulled up his first image on the large screen behind him. It showed a historical photograph from Earth's past, a lunch counter sit-in from the 1960s. "This is from my planet's history. These people were considered lesser by the laws and customs of their time. They couldn't eat at the same restaurants, attend the same schools, or even drink from the same water fountains as others. And when they protested peacefully, they were told to be patient, to wait, to work through proper channels. Tyler clicked to the next image, showing more civil rights protests. The thing about proper channels is that they only work when the people in power want them to work. When those same people benefit from the system being broken, proper channels become a way to delay justice indefinitely. He saw some faculty members shifting uncomfortably. Good. Now, I'm not here to talk about Earth's past. I'm here to talk about Pinnacle Station's present. He pulled up a chart he created, showing complaint statistics. In the past year, there have been 4 to 7 formal complaints filed by students from what the galactic community considers minor species or recent additions to the interstellar community. Of those 4 to 7 complaints, 0 resulted in disciplinary action. 0. The room was completely silent now. I'm also not here to name names or point fingers at specific individuals, Tyler continued. Instead, I want to share some anonymous case studies. He clicked through a series of incidents, each one stripped of identifying details but clearly showing a pattern. Food trays knocked over. Environmental controls tampered with. Training equipment mysteriously malfunctioning. Anonymous complaints filed against the victims rather than the perpetrators. The interesting thing about patterns, Tyler said, his voice growing stronger, is that they reveal choices. Individual incidents can be accidents. Dozens of incidents targeting the same groups of students? That's not an accident. That's a choice. And when administrators see those patterns and do nothing, that's also a choice. Director Voss stood up. Mr. Brooks, I must object to. You'll have your chance to respond after my 15 minutes up. Director, Tyler said firmly. According to the open forum protocol, I have the floor until my time expires. She sat back down, her mandibles clicking with irritation. Tyler took a breath and delivered his closing. I came to Pinnacle Station because I believed what the brochures said, that this was a place where different species learned to work together, to respect each other, to build a better galactic community. But respect isn't automatic. It's not something that just happens because we put different species in the same building. Respect is a choice we make every day. And so is cruelty. He looked directly at the administrative section. The question I'm asking today is simple. What choices is Pinnacle Station going to make? Because right now, students are watching, and they are learning that power matters more than justice, that connections matter more than character, and that the proper channels only work if you're already powerful enough not to need them. Tyler closed his tablet. Thank you for your time. The auditorium erupted. The auditorium didn't just erupt with noise, it exploded with it. Some students were shouting support, others arguing, and a significant portion of the faculty looked like they'd just been slapped. Director Voss tried to restore order, her translator amplifying her voice over the chaos, but it took nearly 5 minutes before the room settled enough for her to speak. Mr. Brooks has made some very serious allegations, she began, her tone icy. Allegations that will be investigated through proper channels. With respect, Director, interrupted Professor Thane, a centurion who taught interspecies ethics, I think Mr. Brooks's entire point was that proper channels have failed. I've personally witnessed incidents that match his case studies, and I've filed my own reports that went nowhere. That started another wave of murmurs. 2 more faculty members stood to voice similar experiences. Tyler remained at the podium, watching as the conversation spiraled beyond his control, but in a good way. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. Once people started talking publicly, the silence became impossible to maintain. What Tyler didn't know was that someone in the audience had been live-streaming the entire assembly. By the time he left the auditorium 2 hours later, after Director Voss had been forced to commit to an independent review of complaint procedures, his speech was already spreading across galactic communication networks. The first place it hit was Earth. Human news services picked it up immediately, framing it as human student stands up to galactic bullies. Within hours, it had millions of views across human networks. But it didn't stop there. On the Qualeth homeworld, Zira's parents watched the speech with tears streaming down their faces. They immediately shared it with their local council, who shared it with the planetary government. For a species that had spent years being dismissed as primitive and irrelevant, seeing one of their children defended so publicly by someone from another world meant everything. The Belvari pacifists shared it as an example of nonviolent resistance. The Meridian Twins' home government used it in diplomatic protests about their treatment by larger empires. Within 3 days, Tyler's 15-minute speech had been viewed over 2 billion times across dozens of species and hundreds of worlds. Pinnacle Station's administration had no choice but to respond. The independent review they promised became unavoidable once the galactic media started asking questions. A committee was formed, this time with representatives from minor species included. The investigation took 2 weeks, and when the findings were released, they were damning. 8 students face expulsion, including all 6 of the Draxians from that first cafeteria incident. 12 faculty members received formal reprimands for failing to act on witnessed incidents. Director Vosh herself was placed on administrative review. New policies were implemented requiring transparent reporting of all student complaints, with quarterly public summaries to ensure accountability. But the real changes happened in smaller, quieter ways. Tyler was walking to class 3 weeks after his speech when a Draxian student he'd never met approached him. Not one of the bullies. This was a younger student with green scales instead of bronze. "I wanted to apologize," the student said quietly. "Not for me specifically, but for my species." What those students did was shameful. Many of us thought so, but we stayed silent because speaking up against our own kind seemed disloyal. "Your speech made me realize that real loyalty means standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable." Tyler didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. "Thanks for telling me." Zira changed too. She'd always been brilliant. Tyler had figured that out within their first conversation, but she'd spent so much energy trying to be invisible that nobody else had noticed. Now, freed from the constant anxiety of harassment, she started speaking up in classes. She joined the debate team. She even started a cultural exchange club where students could share traditions from their home worlds without judgment. One evening about a month after the assembly, Tyler found her in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. "You okay?" he asked, settling into the seat next to her. "More than okay," Zira said, and Tyler could hear the smile in her voice. "I just got a message from my government. They want me to be part of a youth diplomatic corps they are forming. Because of everything that happened, other species are actually interested in talking to us now. Really talking, not just patronizing us." "That's incredible, Zira." "It's because of you. Because you decided that standing up was worth the risk." Tyler shook his head. "I just gave a speech. You're the one who's going to do something with it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching a small transport vessel drift past the station. Finally, Zira asked a question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Why did you do it? Really? You barely knew me. You'd only been here 2 weeks. You could have just ignored it like everyone else." Tyler thought about that. "Back home, my little sister got bullied in middle school. Bad enough that she didn't want to go to class anymore. And I didn't know what to do, so I talked to my grandfather. He told me this story about his time in the military, about how he'd witnessed an officer abusing his authority. My grandfather reported it, even though he knew it would cause problems for him. And when I asked him why he'd risked his career, you know what he said?" "What?" "He said that the price of doing the right thing is usually temporary, but the cost of doing nothing lasts forever. You have to live with your choices. I didn't want to spend the next 2 years living with the choice to look away." Zira's eyes dimmed slightly, the quiet equivalent of tears. "Your grandfather sounds wise. He had his moments." Tyler stood up and stretched. "Come on. We've got that xenobiology exam tomorrow, and I still don't understand how centurion respiration works." "It's actually fascinating," Zira said, brightening immediately. "They have 3 separate respiratory systems that work in sequence." As they walked back toward the residential sections, arguing cheerfully about alien biology, neither of them noticed a small group of students watching them from across the observation deck. But those students noticed them, and more importantly, they noticed how 2 people from completely different worlds had built something that the galaxy desperately needed, a friendship based on respect, defended with courage, and maintained with genuine care. The story of Tyler Brooks and Zira became something of a legend at Pinnacle Station. New students heard about it during orientation. Faculty used it as a teaching example in ethics classes. And whenever someone saw injustice happening in the corridors or cafeterias, more and more often, someone else would step forward, because Tyler had proven something important. You didn't need to be from a powerful species to make a difference. You didn't need advanced technology or military might. Sometimes all you needed was a willingness to stand up, speak out, and remind everyone watching that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're absolutely terrified. And sometimes, the most human thing you can do is refuse to let cruelty become normal, no matter how far from Earth you might be.